Good evening and welcome, Arun sir and Ajeta ma'am.
Good evening,
Very
ma'am.
good evening. Very good evening.
Okay. Paras, you can also switch on your video.
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, sir.
Fine.
Very good evening, Paras.
So Paras, today you are having a two-panel interview with Shri Arun Bhargav sir and Ajeta ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Arun sir is an expert faculty with us, and he's also very experienced with Himachal Pradesh judiciary exams.
Yes, ma'am.
You already know him, and he needs no introduction from my side. Ajeta ma'am is also an expert faculty with LawSikho. She's also serving as assistant professor at Department of Law, Punjab University. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Welcome, sir. So we can start the session with Arun sir starting first and then Ajeta ma'am, or it can be a mixed thing also. Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
Okay. Over to you, sir.
so, Paras, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, sir. So I'm Paras Ahuja. I'm a resident of District Panchkula in the state of Haryana. Sir, I graduated in the year 2022 from National Law University, Jodhpur. Sir, I consider myself as a compassionate and a goal-oriented person, and I really enjoy working hard to achieve my goals. Sir, my hobbies include researching and writing on topics of my interest, occasionally writing poems to unburden myself, and discussing about my life with my parents.
Paras, you have done your law from National Law University. Can you please tell me which national law school you have pursued your LLB?
Yes, sir, from Jodhpur, sir.
Okay. So, Paras, what
Yes,
is
sir.
the meaning of your name?
Yes, sir. Sir, Paris is a precious stone, and if it comes in contact with iron, then it turns iron into gold. Sir, with respect to human beings, Paris has a metaphorical significance to refer to purity and the transformative nature of a person.
So you have the capabilities of turning iron into gold.
Yes, sir.
So, Paras, what is your native place? That is Panchkula itself.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And your parental home is in Panchkula itself. Am I right?
So we are currently residents of Panchkula, and for the past 10 years, we've been living in Chandigarh or Panchkula alternatively. But my father belongs to a village in Haryana, sir. Sanyana village in Fatehbad district, sir.
Oh,
Yes, sir.
okay. So Paras, as now you are appearing for Himachal Pradesh Judiciary,
Yes, sir.
why you are giving preference to Himachal over Haryana?
Yes, sir. Sir, it is the serenity of the state of Himachal Pradesh, its pious ambience, and the fact that it sits at the lap of the nature, which really attracted me towards the state of Himachal Pradesh. Moreover, sir, I feel that my temperament, the kind of person I am, it aligns a lot with Himachal Pradesh. It is the spiritual inclination of the persons. The people here are so rooted in their traditions, and it's a peace-loving state. So that is the kind of life I've always wanted to live, and that's why I'm so motivated to serve in the state of Himachal Pradesh.
So as you said that you are tilted towards the traditions of Himachal,
Yes, sir.
Paras, how many times you have visited Himachal Pradesh?
Sir, I have never gotten the opportunity to visit Himachal Pradesh, but I have known the traditions of Himachal Pradesh through some persons I have known and through whatever I have read on the internet and in the media, sir.
So, Paras, how many districts are there in Himachal?
So there are 12 districts in Himachal Pradesh.
And which is the biggest district area-wise?
Sir, I'm sorry, sir. I'll have to research about it, sir. I'll research about it, sir.
Paras, as you are currently residing in Panchkula,
Yes, sir.
and how far the border of Himachal is from Panchkula?
Sir, it's very close. In fact, I think about if we travel 40 minutes from Panchkula, we'll be able to see the beautiful hills of Solin. And that's what I experienced for the first time when I went there for prelims.
Okay. So, which is the first town of Himachal which comes on the way?
Sir, if I'm not wrong, it's Parvanu, sir.
Paras, as when you are traveling from Panchkula to Shimla,
Yes, sir.
there is a town named as Pinjore.
Yes, sir.
So, Pinjore falls in Himachal or in Haryana?
Sir, it falls in Haryana, sir. It is a part of the Panchkula district. It's a town within the Panchkula district, sir.
Okay. Paras, as with respect specifically to the Himachal Pradesh,
Yes, sir.
I want to ask you that what you have learned about the traditions of Himachal.
Yes, sir. Sir, about the traditions of Himachal, when it comes to the cuisine, then the Himachali Dham is not unknown to anyone. So even apart from the Himachali Dham, we have very sumptuous Himachali food like thupka, and then we have babru, and then, sir, we have sir, Sidhu is again a very important cuisine in the state of Himachal Pradesh. So, and not just the cuisine, sir, the Kullu shawls, the Chamba rumals, and the Pullan chappals. I couldn't stop myself from again and again looking at the pictures. And sir, I have myself worn a lot of Kullu shawls. Sir, when it comes to the handicrafts and the paintings, then the name of Kangra paintings emerges as one of the most beautifully crafted arts of our country. So not just that, in the tradition of the state of Himachal Pradesh, we see that there is a spiritual inclination and that can be witnessed from the Mahashivratri fair, which is conducted in the district of Mandi every year, sir. So the state of Himachal Pradesh is a home to so many temples, and I feel like it has been blessed by God specifically in that respect when it comes to Chintapurni Devi Ji or Chamunda Devi Ji or Naina Devi Ji. Yes, sir. So we can say, sir, the state of Himachal Pradesh is very rich culturally.
Okay. Paras, as your father, as you stated in your form, that he is a government officer in
Yes, sir.
HSAMB. What is HSAMB?
Yes, sir. So HSAMB is Haryana State Agricultural Marketing Committee.
Okay. So your father is an IAS officer, I believe.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So he joined the Haryana Civil Services, and after serving for some years, 3 years back, he was inducted into the Indian Administrative Service, sir.
Paras, with respect to your hobbies, please
Yes,
tell
sir.
us something.
Yes, sir. So I really like to research and write on topics of my interest. For instance,
So what kind of interest you have?
So generally, I like to research on social legal topics. So one of the topics that I researched on recently was the progressive trajectory of the Domestic Violence Act, which can be seen through a slew of Supreme Court judgments, starting from, yes, sir.
Paras, Domestic Violence Act is a civil law or it is a criminal law?
So it provides us with both the remedies, civil as well as criminal, sir. It's a
Okay,
mixture
so-
of the two, sir.
So, in which section of the Domestic Violence Act the protection orders are being enshrined?
So it's given under Section 18 of the Domestic Violence Act, sir.
Paras, as you have done your law from Jodhpur, yes.
Yes, sir.
So, which places in Jodhpur you had visited?
So I had visited the Mehrangarh Fort. So I had visited Old City, and there are a lot of heritage hotels in the whole city. So I had visited them, sir. So I also had the pleasure of visiting Mandor Gardens, sir.
So, Mehrangarh Fort, which Rajput ruler has
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So
built
it's
up this particular fort?
Sir Rao Jodha, sir.
Paras, which subject of law is of your interest?
So the Indian Evidence Act is of great interest to me, sir.
Okay. So, as you stated that Indian Evidence Act is of your interest, can you please tell me that as recently the parliament has placed three bills on the table with
Yes,
respect
sir.
to the point that CRPC, IPC, and the Indian Evidence Act are going to be repealed and the new enactments will be there. So,
Yes,
with respect to the Indian Evidence Act,
yes,
what
sir.
changes you see in the current bill which is there on table?
Yes, sir. Sir, the first change I see is that the definition of oral evidence has been widened to include the evidence which is given electronically. Sir, further, the definition of electronic evidence has also been widened to include material that is stored in semiconductor memory. Sir, moreover, the instances under which we can give secondary evidence as specified under the section 65 of the Indian Evidence Act 1872 have also been increased. One more instance has been added, which is in case the genuineness of the document is in question. In that case, secondary evidence can be given. Sir, apart from that, with respect to section 123 of the Indian Evidence Act 1872, certain changes have been made under the new bill. That is that if any advice has been tendered from the Council of Ministers to the President, then the court in no case can ask for production of such document before it, even if the same is not harmful to public interest per se, sir.
Paras,
Yes.
as in the Indian Evidence Act, along with the Code of Criminal Procedure and along with the process of investigation, there is a very important concept that is being called as the test identification parade.
Sir,
Uh,
pardon,
and
sir, I couldn't hear you, sir.
my question to you is
Yes, sir.
that in Indian Evidence Act, apart from that, in the CRPC as well as in the process of investigation, there is a very important concept that is called as the test identification parade.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, under which provision of the Indian Evidence Act test identification parade is considered to be relevant?
So it's section 9 of the Indian Evidence Act.
Do it specifically provides with respect to the word test identification parade, or some other things are mentioned in section 9?
So it doesn't use specifically the word test identification parade, but it states that any fact is relevant if it helps the court ascertain the identity of the person whose identity is relevant, or identity of a thing whose identity is relevant. So, sir, since by conducting a test identification parade, the identity of the accused, there's clarity on the issue of identity of the accused. Therefore, test identification parade is considered relevant under section 9, under this specific phrase, sir.
Paras, if during the investigation the police authorities had not gone through with the test identification parade of the concerned accused, and directly in the court of law, at the stage of trial, the identification is required to be done. Do it is
Yes, sir.
permissible?
Sir, in some cases it would be permissible. For example, sir, if the accused was arrested on the spot, or if the victim knew the accused from before, or if the victim had provided very precise details about the identity of the accused in the FIR, sir. So in all these situations, there's no need to conduct test identification parade. So although as a matter of prudence in all other cases, it is required that test identification parade should be conducted. However, sir, even otherwise, there is an exception to it, as held in the Manu Sharma case, sir, that a test identification parade nowhere under the Code of Criminal Procedure or under the Indian Evidence Act is a condition precedent for the admissibility of identification evidence. Therefore, even if it is not conducted and the court feels that the testimony of the witness at the time of doc identification is blemishless and creditworthy, then the court may ignore the factum of the test identification parade having not been conducted, sir.
Whereas if the test identification parade is being conducted and the police officers themselves conducted,
Yes, sir.
what will be the impact of this?
Sir, then the bar of section 162 CRPC would apply, and then it cannot be used to corroborate the testimony of the witness at the time of doc identification, sir.
So, can a judicial magistrate can also conduct test identification parade?
Sir, although the general rule is that it should be conducted by an executive magistrate, But sir, in my opinion, if a judicial magistrate conducts it, then that would also be valid, in my opinion, sir.
Paras, as with respect to the concept of remand,
Yes, sir.
in section 167 of the Indian Evidence Act, it is stated that only when the accused is produced before the concerned magistrate,
Yes,
only for the first initial 15 days, the
yes,
police
sir.
custody can be granted.
Yes, sir.
How you see this particular provision? Do it is justified, or the police remand should be given beyond the 15 days period also?
Sir, I feel that in the Senthil Balaji case, the Supreme Court expressed its opinion that the police remand should be, the decision in the Anupam Kulkarni case should be reconsidered, and police remand should be granted even after 15 days. But sir, my personal opinion on this matter is that if police remand is granted even after 15 days, then that might increase the scope for use of illicit means to extract confessions out of the accused persons, and scope for custodial torture or other such illegal activities might also increase. So, sir, in my personal opinion, the 15-day limit and the first 15-day limit is a good law, sir.
So, as you stated that there will be more possibilities of custodial interrogations
Yes,
and tortures, etc., can be there.
yes.
Is it not you are pointing out that police conducts torture over the prisoners?
No, sir, I am not making a general statement with respect to that. So, in fact, it is because of the police officers that we are able to sit and sleep in a secured manner in our houses. But, sir, we have to consider the interests of the accused person also in hand. And we have to frame our laws in such a way that there is no possibility of abuse if such a law falls into the hands of any unscrupulous persons. So, sir, considering the due process model of law, I feel that the criminal law should have sufficient cushions to protect the rights of the accused persons, and that's why, sir, I feel like that. Yes.
Paras, just tell me one thing, that when the statements of witnesses are being recorded by the police officers under section 161,
Yes.
it is clearly mentioned in 162 that such statements should not be signed.
Yes,
But
sir.
still, in the practical scenario, the statements are usually signed by the witnesses, and the police
Yes, sir.
officers usually go for that.
Yes, sir.
So, how you see this particular thing?
Sir, as per the law laid down by the Supreme Court on this point, merely because the statement is signed would not mean that the statement cannot be considered at all by the court for any purpose, but the court will approach it in a cautionary manner and will try to look at the statement in light of the facts and the circumstances, and will not eschew it from consideration altogether, sir.
Paras, as recently the Honorable Supreme Court has uh, given certain guidelines and directions with regard to the gender sensitivity
Yes.
and judicial stereotyping. Can you give me some instances that how the gender stereotyping is there in the judiciary?
Yes, sir. So can I take few seconds to think, sir?
Yes, sure.
Sir, one major instance of gender stereotyping that we see that which was also taken note of by the Supreme Court in Aparna Bhatt case, is sometimes courts pass bail orders which have very stereotypical bail conditions. For example, sir, in this case, when the court was considering tie for Rakhi bail conditions. So, sir, these are examples of how sometimes the courts might perpetuate gender stereotypes unintentionally and unknowingly, sir. Sir, another example is that certain leading lawyers have also reported on this matter that the court atmosphere and the way they are treated by the senior advocates and other lawyers, sometimes the female lawyers are treated by senior advocates. There is a sense of male chauvinism, and there is a sense of stereotyping sometimes that is found in the litigation circles. So we should take care that that is completely removed with in judicial interference, sir.
Paras, with respect to the Himachal Pradesh Urban Rent Control Act,
Yes, sir.
there was a judgment passed by the Honorable High Court of Himachal Pradesh, and with respect to Section 14 of the HP Rent Control Act,
Yes, sir.
a, a big point was discussed by the Honorable High Court. Can you tell me what is that point and which judgment it was?
Sir, with respect to Section 14, sir.
Yes, with respect to the determination of rent as well as with respect to Section 14 also.
Okay, sir, I believe it's the Chaman Lal Bali versus State of Himachal Pradesh decision. So is it that decision, sir?
Yes.
Okay,
But
yes.
what is the point decided by Honorable High Court?
Yes, sir. So in that case, the High Court first of all struck down the amendments that were made by the 2009 amendment, which came into force in 2012, with respect to the provisions of determination of rent and the allied provisions under Section 5 and 6. So with respect to Section 14 specifically, sir, I'm not very clear on that point, but can I make a guess, sir, if you permit me? Can I make an educated guess, sir?
Yes, yes.
Sir, I believe that it was on the point of the right to re-entry after eviction has been made on the ground that the land in question is required by the government or the improvement trust in that under Section 14 Clause 3, sir. And it was provided that the provision that the right to re-entry should be decided by a mutual consent of the landlord and tenant. That particular part was struck down by the court because the court found that it was very arbitrary, sir. So that is what I can recall at the moment, sir.
Paras, how many honorable justices are sitting in the Himachal Pradesh High Court currently,
So there are presently 12 sitting judges in the High Court.
including Chief Justice?
Yes, sir, including Chief Justice, sir.
And who is the current Chief Justice of HP High Court?
Sir, Honorable Justice Ramachandra Rao.
Paras, if you are being selected as a judicial officer and a bail application comes to you, in what time duration you have to decide that bail application?
So I would decide it within 2 weeks as laid down by the Supreme Court in Satyendra Kumar Antal versus CBI decision, sir.
Paras, my last question to you is that what do you mean by demographic dividend?
Yes, sir. So demographic dividend is the point that we reach in with respect to the number of our population, which is most suitable to our economic and social growth.
Okay. So I'm shifting towards Aditya ma'am. Aditya ma'am, you can take over the charge.
Thank you, sir. Hi, Paras. Good evening.
Good evening, ma'am.
Okay, so Paras, I think sir has already asked you for an introduction, and you've given a wonderful introduction. I'm really impressed. Paras, my question to you is, why should we select you?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I am a very goal-oriented person and I like working hard to achieve my goals. Ma'am, I also like to keep improving myself, and I think that quality in me will help me to be a good judicial officer. Ma'am, I'm also a very compassionate person and I have the ability to place myself in the shoes of another person. I think that quality will also help me to be a very good judicial officer and serve the judiciary of our country as expected, ma'am.
Okay, so you said you have the quality of stepping into other person's shoes. Don't you
Yes,
think you're
ma'am.
going to be a little biased then?
No, ma'am. Ma'am, I feel that when any victim comes before me, or any accused comes before me, or any witness comes before me, I'll be able to see the situation from that person's perspective. And when I'll be able to place my shoes in in the shoes of each of these persons, I will be able to understand the testimony they are making in a better way and will be able to make a good decision. Ma'am, my ability to place myself in the shoes of another person is not limited to the victim, but it extends to the accused person as well, ma'am.
Okay. So, Paras, what do you understand by the word fairness? Since you're going to be fair, what is
Yes, ma'am.
fairness?
Ma'am, fairness is when we don't have any irrelevant any irrelevant consideration in our mind, and we base our decision solely on merit and the ideals of justice. Any discriminatory factor or any consideration which is not relevant for the purposes of decision making is not present in our mind. That is, ma'am, when we are absolutely fair.
Okay. Paras, where do you find fairness in the Constitution of India?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, the concept of fairness can be read as a part of Article 21 of the Constitution of India, which gives us the right to life and in which is implicit the right of a fair trial.
Okay. And Paras, my another question to you here is, do you think that the penal laws that have been enacted in India, they
Yes.
are written from a criminal's point of view, an accused point of view? Do you think they're fair?
Ma'am, I think they're mostly fair and they do take into account the position of the victim as well, especially, ma'am, by a slew of amendments, the criminal laws have been modified in such a way that now they balance the interests of victim and accused. Both the interests are balanced, ma'am.
Okay. And do we have a provision for victim compensation scheme anywhere?
Yes, ma'am, it's given under Section 357A as inserted by the 2009 amendment, ma'am.
Okay, so it's in CRPC, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So tomorrow, if you are selected,
Yes,
what
ma'am.
is going to be the advocate amount of compensation that you would like to give to a victim?
Ma'am, under 357A.
Yeah.
So, ma'am, under 357A, since I will not be determining the amount of compensation and it will be the District Legal Services Authority which will be determining the amount of compensation. But, ma'am, if I'm referring any case to the authority, then I will consider the facts and circumstances and accordingly refer for an appropriate amount, ma'am.
So, Paras, do you or will you have the power to, give compensation to a victim anywhere in CRPC?
Ma'am, I didn't get the question, ma'am.
So
Anywhere.
tomorrow, if you're selected, will you have the power to give compensation to the victim anywhere as per the provisions of CRPC?
Ma'am, so the power would be under Section 357 of the Criminal Procedure Code. And in case of conviction for any offense, irrespective of whether fine forms a part of it or not, compensation can be granted, ma'am.
Compensation can be granted. Okay. So you are not going to determine the quantum of the compensation?
Ma'am, under 357, I will have the power to determine, ma'am.
And what is going to be the parameters that you're going to follow?
Ma'am, the injury that is suffered by the victim, the paying capacity of the convict is also going to be a factor. Ma'am, the impact of life, the impact that it has had on the victim and not just in the present moment, but also the future possible ramifications of such impact, ma'am. I will also consider those, ma'am.
Okay. So Paras, on this point, please tell me what is the difference between compensation and fine?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, compensation is paid to the victim and fine is paid to the state. Ma'am, moreover, compensation, it's not a strictly criminal remedy. It's provided under civil law. It can be given under provisions of the Constitution as interpreted by the Supreme Court, whereas fine is a strictly criminal form of punishment, ma'am.
Okay, correct. So, Paras, are you aware that recently there's an amendment that was made to the Wildlife Protection Amendment Act of 2023?
Yes, ma'am. There was an amendment made. Yes,
Yes. So can you give me the salient features of that amendment?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, there was a provision on invasive alien species that was added. Ma'am, there was a new chapter added for us, which to incorporate the provisions of the CITES in the Wildlife Protection Act. And ma'am, we also rationalized our schedules, like the schedule on vermin was deleted, although the central government still has the power to notify a species as vermin, but the schedules were rationalized. And new schedule was added for a wholesome incorporation of the CITES treaty in India, ma'am.
Okay, nice. So Paras, under Section 57 of the Wildlife Protection Act, on whom does
Yes.
the burden of proof lie?
Ma'am, I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm not very well versed with this concept, ma'am. I'll revise my Wildlife Protection Act, ma'am.
Okay, no problem. So Paras, today is November 17th, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
What is so special about this day?
Ma'am, I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm not aware about that, ma'am. I'll research about it, ma'am.
Okay. Paras, who is the Chief Administrator of the Himachal Pradesh Service Selection Committee?
I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm not aware about that, ma'am. I'll research on it, ma'am.
Okay, no problem. Since Paras, you really want to shift your base to Himachal and
Yes,
you are
ma'am.
really fond of Himachal. So can you tell me what is Palampur famous for?
Ma'am, Palampur is famous for there are a lot of handicrafts that are made by the locals of Palampur. Ma'am, that is what I'm aware of about as a speciality of the district Palampur, ma'am.
Okay, so from when you enter Palampur, we see
Yes,
the
ma'am.
beautiful mountains. What is the
Yes,
name of
ma'am.
those beautiful mountains?
Sorry, ma'am. I'm not very sure about that, ma'am.
Okay, no problem. So Paras, I also heard that you have an interest in poetry.
Yes, ma'am.
So who is the most famous poet of Himachal Pradesh?
Ma'am, I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm not aware about that. I'll read about that, ma'am.
No problem, no problem. So are you aware that Himachal Pradesh shares borders with the other states? One
Yes,
being
ma'am.
Haryana.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Can you tell me the other states?
Ma'am, there is Uttarakhand towards the east, ma'am, and then it also shares a border with the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. And ma'am, it also shares borders with Uttar Pradesh, ma'am.
Okay. Now, Paras, moving on to the legal part. Let's say there is a sexual harassment that has taken place at a workplace.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, the victim is going to, approach under the Sexual Harassment at Workplaces Act 2013, or are
Yes,
we
ma'am.
going to read it into Section 354A of IPC?
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, both the remedies would be available to the victim. The remedy under the POSH Act 2013 to prefer a complaint to the Internal Complaints Committee doesn't exclude in any way the remedy to the right to prefer a criminal complaint under Section 354 of the Indian Penal Code. So the victim can make use of both the remedies, ma'am.
So both the remedies are available simultaneously?
Yes, ma'am. Both the remedies can be pursued simultaneously, ma'am.
Okay, all right. Tell me one thing, Paras, which is the recent and the latest judgment that has been given by the Honorable Supreme Court on the dying declaration?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, few months back, I had read the judgment of Irfan at the rate Naka versus State of UP. And ma'am, if I can remember correctly, about 1 week back, there was Manjunath versus State of Karnataka as well, ma'am.
Yeah, good. Okay. So, Paras, tell me one thing. What was the main ethos behind inserting Section 354D into IPC? What was the purpose?
Yes, ma'am. Section 354D, which criminalizes the act of stalking. Ma'am, the purpose for insertion of such an offense, such a specific offense in the Indian Penal Code, was to protect the security of women and to make sure that they are able to move out of their houses, enter the professional domain, and to make the outside world safe for them. In short, ma'am.
Okay. So, are we saying that Section 354D is a continuation of Section 354?
Yes, ma'am. In a way, it is a continuation and makes a very specific offense, but it has certain other additional ingredients as well, ma'am.
So, if we already had the offense of, outraging the modesty of a woman under Section 354, So
Yes,
what was the need for adding section 354D? Why did we create a specific offense?
ma'am, because we found that there were very specific instances of stalking that were being reported by several women across the country, and a specific law which recognizes such an offense must be created because, ma'am, it was seen that a lot of times police officers refuse to register FIRs under Section 354 on the ground that such an act doesn't amount to outraging the modesty. So, ma'am, when the legislature specifically recognized it as an offense, then it was mandatory for the police system, the investigative system, to register FIR and proceed with the investigation of such an offense, ma'am.
Okay, Paris. So my another question to you here is that tomorrow, if you are selected, will
Yes.
you be having the power to try the offense of stalking?
Ma'am, as far as I can recall, the offense of stalking can be tried by a magistrate of first class. I'm not very sure about it, ma'am. So, ma'am, I believe I will be able to try it, ma'am.
Okay, all right. Bacha, Paris, what do you understand by the word man in IPC?
Yes, ma'am. So the word man includes it includes just the gender man and not the woman includes females and man includes males, ma'am. Unlike the word he, which includes the case of women as well, the word man is restricted to only the gender of men, ma'am.
Okay. And Paras, are you aware that when we speak of general, exceptions to murder here, there is
Yes,
in
ma'am.
one particular exception which is grave and sudden provocation.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Why do we have the word and? Why is it grave and sudden? Why not grave or sudden?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, if we consider a scenario that it is grave or sudden, then even the slightest of provocation, which is just sudden but has absolutely close to nil intensity, will also fall as an exception to murder. On the other hand, ma'am, if the provocation is grave but it is not sudden, then the accused person would have sufficient time for his equilibrium to have settled, and it would be unjust to consider it as an exception, ma'am, in that case.
All right. Okay. So, Paras, what is the judicial approach towards the cyber crimes that have been committed against women?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, so with respect to the cyber crime against women as recognized under certain provisions of the Indian Penal Code and the IT Act, it is found that the Supreme Court has held that a very strict standard of proof to the extent of requiring, to the extent that it requires a very an extreme and unrealistic standard of proof should not be imposed in such cases, and such cases should be dealt with consistently with the with a reasonable and realistic standard of proof that should be applicable in such cases now.
All right. Okay. And Paras, recently the Supreme Court, they gave a judgment on same-sex marriages.
Yes, ma'am.
What is your take on that judgment?
Ma'am, I agree with the minority opinion authored by Honorable Justice Chandrachud in that decision. While, ma'am, I personally believe that the LGBT people should have the right to marry, I feel that the recognition of right to marry of the LGBT people should come from the legislature, and the judiciary giving the right to marry may amount to judicial adventurism. But, ma'am, I do feel that they should have, like as Honorable Justice Chandrachud said in his judgment, that they should be given the right to civil unions because a statement was made on record by the Attorneys General of India to that effect. So the right to civil union should have been recognized by the Supreme Court. That is my opinion on the issue now.
Okay. And if we legalize the same-sex marriages,
Yes.
so are we going to implement the Uniform Civil Code on them also?
Yes, ma'am.
So are they going to constitute the same class or a different class?
Ma'am, they are going to constitute the same class. I don't see any issue in classifying them as a separate class, in classifying them as a same class as other heterosexual couples, ma'am.
Okay, good. And what do you understand by hate crime?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, hate crime as defined in the 267th Law Commission report is a crime which is committed against a person based on his identity specific to caste, religion, gender, or ethnicity, ma'am.
Okay. And Paras, now we have seen that the technology has been advancing, right?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
we know the evidentiary value of a WhatsApp chat. What is going to be the evidentiary value of a message you send on Instagram, which is known as a direct message, a DM?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, evidentially value in what context, ma'am? Like to prove what fact, ma'am? I think that would vary what a person is trying to prove, ma'am. On that.
Okay, so will it be admissible in the court of law?
Yes, ma'am, it will be admissible in the court of law as electronic evidence, ma'am. After due procedure under the Indian Evidence Act has been followed. For example, ma'am, if it is being presented in form of secondary electronic evidence, then compliance with the certificate requirement of Section 65B should be made. So, ma'am, if you are following all the procedural requirements, then it will be admissible as evidence, ma'am.
Okay. Now that you've mentioned about Section 65B, in
Yes,
the year
ma'am.
2020, the Honorable Supreme Court of India, they have pronounced a judgment pertaining to Section 65B. Can you
Yes,
tell me
ma'am.
the name of the judgment?
Yes, ma'am. It was Arjun Pandit Rao versus Kailash Kushan Rao. And ma'am, it was delivered by the bench of Honorable Justice Nariman, if I remember correctly, ma'am.
Okay. Now, Paras, you mentioned that Indian Evidence Act is one of your area of interest, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
What do you understand by preponderance of probabilities?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, preponderance of probability is a standard of proof that we apply in civil cases and under some situations in the criminal cases as well. Ma'am, it is a standard of proof which is more than establishing a prima facie case, but less than establishing the case beyond reasonable doubt. Ma'am, it is the standard which we find to be statutorily recognized under Section 3, definition of the word proved under the Indian Evidence Act, ma'am.
Okay. So is the definition of the word court, do you
Yes,
find it exhaustive under the Indian Evidence Act?
Ma'am, yes, I find it exhaustive, ma'am.
Okay, and what makes you say so?
Ma'am, because it defines court to include judges, magistrates, and all other persons legally authorized to take evidence, ma'am. So I feel, ma'am, it's an exhaustive definition which covers every possibility of every possible institution being recognized as a court, ma'am.
Okay.
Although, ma'am, may I add, ma'am? Ma'am, though, ma'am, if we read the definition, since it uses the word includes, so we may say that it's an inclusive definition. But if understood in the practical context, then I feel, ma'am, it exhaustively defines the word court.
Okay, and what is the rationale behind excluding the arbiters here from the definition of the word court?
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, under the Arbitration and Conciliation Act, the arbitrators are not bound to follow the procedure of the Indian Evidence Act and the Code of Civil Procedure is also recognized under Section 19 of the 1996 Act, ma'am. And the reason for excluding arbitration from the strict rules of evidence law was to allow it to be an institution which is governed by the principles of party autonomy and to provide for a more liberal, easy, and a more flexible method of resolution of disputes, ma'am.
Okay. So, Paras, what do you understand by, Section 27 of the Indian Evidence Act?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, Section 27 of the Indian Evidence Act is based on the principle of confirmation by subsequent fact finding, and it is an exception to Section 25 and 26. Ma'am, it provides that if an accused gives any information to the police officer while he is in police custody, and a fact is discovered which distinctly relates to the information that the police officer gave to the accused, then such information as distinctly relates to the discovery of fact shall be relevant, and this is an exception to section 25 and 26 of the Indian Evidence Act, ma'am.
Okay, so let's say there is a person, there is a man X. He is not an accused at the moment,
Yes,
but
ma'am.
and he is not also not in the custody of the the police here,
Yes, ma'am.
and he leads to a discovery of a fact. Are you
Yes.
going to make that statement relevant under section 27?
Yes, ma'am. As per the recent decision of Raju versus State of MP, it would not be relevant, ma'am.
Not be relevant.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
so when is it going to be relevant?
Ma'am, as per the recent decision of Raju versus State of MP, the two requirements are that he should be an accused person and he should be in police custody at the time he makes the statement. So these two essentials have to be fulfilled. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so let's say he's an accused and is also in the custody of the police, and he leads the police to a fact finding, but that is related to some other case, not to
Yes,
the case
ma'am.
in which he is being accused of. Now, what is going to be the scenario?
So, ma'am, so, ma'am, the question is whether such discovery of fact can be made relevant in another case, ma'am.
Yeah. Yes.
I believe it cannot be.
It cannot be. Okay. All right. Okay. My last question to you here, Paris, is why is law of evidence lex ferrae?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, it is lex ferrae because the law of evidence, the Indian Evidence Act specifically, applies to the place where the judicial proceedings are being conducted. So the law of evidence, the applicable law of evidence would be determined on the basis of the place where the judicial proceedings are being conducted, and that's why it is lex ferrae, ma'am.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
So we can move on to Sir. Arun, sir?
Yes, yes, yes. No. So, Paris, let us come to the
Yes.
feedback. Let us come to the feedback now.
Yes,
बच्चे
sir.
जहाँ तक लॉ की बात है, you are good enough, ठीक है?
Yes,
I have
sir.
tested your papers also. I think approximately 20 sheet, 20 के आसपास आपने टेस्ट पेपर्स मेरे पास लिख के दिए
Yes,
हैं,
sir.
ज्यादा ही होंगे शायद से.
Yes,
And all
sir.
those things we have done. As far as law is concerned, I don't think उसमें कोई भी कमी है. But yes, जहाँ पे हिमाचल से रिलेटेड सवाल है बच्चे, वहां पे थोड़ा सा अभी इम्प्रोवाइजेशन की जरूरत है. लेट अस कम टू पॉइंट बाय पॉइंट. एज आई स्टार्टेड दैट हाउ यू सी हिमाचल, है ना, तो आपने एक ही बार में सब कुछ आप बताना
Yes,
शुरू
sir.
करके उससे थोड़ा सा बचना है, ठीक है? डोंट डोंट ट्राई दैट, बिकॉज अगर आप
Yes,
बहुत
sir.
बहुत ज्यादा बताने शुरू करोगे तो वो समझेंगे कि आपको बहुत ज्यादा पता है, ठीक है?
Yes, sir.
तो वो कहीं ना कहीं आपको स्क्रू अप कर देंगे क्योंकि आपको
Yes,
बहुत
sir.
सारी जानकारी नहीं पता, ठीक है?
Yes, sir.
तो जैसे अभी मैम ने आपसे एक सवाल पूछा पालमपुर से रिलेटेड, तो यू वर
Yes,
लाइक कि ओके पालमपुर से रिलेटेड शायद आपको इतनी जानकारी नहीं
yes,
है, एम आई राइट?
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
फिर भी स्टिल यू आंसर्ड ओके, आई एज यू थॉट दैट ओके हैंडीक्राफ्ट हिमाचल के मशहूर हैं, सो ये हैंडीक्राफ्ट बोल देते हैं. बट विद
Yes.
रिस्पेक्ट टू पालमपुर, पालमपुर इज वेरी फेमस फॉर टी गार्डन्स, ठीक है?
Okay,
पालमपुर इज
sir.
फेमस फॉर टी गार्डन्स. एंड दूसरी आपने बच्चे गलती क्या कर दी वहां पे कि पालमपुर इज नॉट अ डिस्ट्रिक्ट. पालमपुर इज नॉट अ
Okay.
डिस्ट्रिक्ट, इट इज डिस्ट्रिक्ट कांगड़ा इन विच पालमपुर इज अ टाउन, है ना? तो उसका
Okay, sir.
थोड़ा सा ध्यान रखना कि कभी कभी हम फ्लो में ज्यादा
Yes,
बोल
sir.
जाएंगे, तो उससे बचना है, ठीक है?
Yes, sir.
But I believe कि as far as the law questions are concerned, you gave the very right answer. But yes, with respect to the other things, थोड़ा सा आप ज्यादा बोल रहे हो, ठीक है? तो उससे थोड़ा सा
Okay,
हटना
sir.
है, ठीक है? आपको अगर
Yes, sir.
लगेगा कि आप ज्यादा बोलोगे और फिर वहां से ज्यादा सवाल पूछने की संभावना बनती है, ठीक है? यू
Yes.
मस्ट बी अंडरस्टैंडिंग दैट. तो
Yes, sir.
उससे थोड़ा सा बचना है, ठीक है? इन द अपकमिंग सेशन जो भी आपके मॉक सेशन होंगे, उस पे काम करो, ठीक है? कि जरूरत से
Yes.
ज्यादा नहीं बोलना है, ठीक है? सामने वाले को सवाल पूछने पे मजबूर करो, ठीक है?
Yes,
खुद
sir.
बहुत सारे चीजें मत बता दो कि वो आपसे बहुत सारे
Yes,
क्वेश्चन
sir.
पूछने में मजबूर हो जाए, ठीक है? तो
Okay, sir.
इंटरव्यू की डायरेक्शन अपने आप बनानी है,
Okay, sir.
गलत डायरेक्शन में उसको मत लेके जाना। बाकी आई डोंट फाइंड एनी अदर पॉइंट। बस एक चीज और है,
Yes.
whenever you are giving any answer, तो you are not taking any pause। ठीक है, आप बिल्कुल भी रुक नहीं रहे हो, सवाल खत्म होता ही तुरंत आंसर आ रहा है। दो यू
Okay,
आर
sir.
कैपेबल एनफ टू गिव द आंसर, इसलिए आ रहे हैं, लेकिन मेरे ख्याल से 2 सेकंड का पॉज लेने के बाद ही आंसर देना है। ठीक है।
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
तीसरा एक चीज मैं कहूंगा, आई डोंट नो आदित्य मैम विल बी एग्री विद दैट और नॉट, बट ये आप ये आपका एक ना बिहेवियर है। मैं काफी समय से आपके साथ इन टच हूँ, तो
Yes, sir.
आपके हर सेंटेंस में 1 2 3 बार सर आ जाता है या मैम आ जाता
Yes,
है।
sir.
यस। सो उसको कोशिश करना, बिकॉज आपको थोड़ा सा फॉर्मल रहना पड़ेगा। ठीक है, एंड
Yes, sir.
फॉर्मलाइजेशन इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट इन द इंटरव्यू स्पेसिफिकली। तो अगर सर बोलना भी है तो एक बार अगर बोल के काम चल सकता है तो इट इज गुड इनफ। ठीक है, बार बार
Yes,
बोलोगे तो ऐसा होता है कि आप ज्यादा हो रहे हैं। ठीक है, मतलब
yes,
इतना ज्यादा मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि थोड़ा सा इंटरव्यू को फॉर्मल बनाना पड़ेगा। ठीक है, बाकी विद रिस्पेक्ट टू योर बॉडी लैंग्वेज इट वाज गुड। ठीक है, थ्रू आउट द सेशन यू वर हैविंग द स्माइल ऑन योर फेस, वो भी अच्छा है। बस एक चीज का और ध्यान रखना, अभी यहाँ पे क्योंकि हम ऑनलाइन हैं, सो आई एम नॉट एबल टू गेट टू नो कि आपका आई कांटेक्ट कैसे आप मेंटेन कर रहे हैं। ठीक है, तो
yes, sir.
उस पे थोड़ा सा आप ध्यान रखना कि जब भी आप सेशन में वहां पे जाओगे तो आई कांटेक्ट पे थोड़ा सा फोकस रखना है, जिसके साथ भी आप बात
Yes,
कर
sir.
रहे हैं उनके साथ आंख में आंख डाल के बात करेंगे। ठीक है, बाकी रेस्ट
Yes, sir.
आदित्य मैम विल टेल यू।
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
ओके।
Thank you, sir. Okay, Paris. So
Yes,
we'll start with your feedback. I totally agree with sir. तो बहुत बारी सर मैम ये बहुत आ रहा है. Okay, so उस चीज पे we need to work. Okay,
yes, sir.
eye contact नहीं था during the interview because I think you were focusing on something else on the wall maybe or something else.
No, ma'am, actually, I was looking at your photo and not the camera. So, ma'am, us
Yeah,
वजह से नहीं-
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So I felt there was no eye contact, and I agree with sir because ये online session है. So yeah, so वहाँ पे you have to be, little focused. एक आप बहुत ज़्यादा information दे रहे हो. So you are opening the avenue for the panelists to ask you more and more questions because you are yourself giving them the information. So when you started about Himachal, you were so much into it that I thought that probably this candidate knows everything about Himachal, everything in and out. That is why I started with the very basic questions. Okay, because वो आप हमें अपने behavior से show कर रहे हो कि मुझे सब पता है. Okay, and you did not take a pause when sir asked you about about the traditions of Himachal. You went on and on. So ऐसा लगा everything was like pre-crafted, like पहले ही answers लिखे हुए हैं और वो spontaneous नहीं था. This is what I felt, that it was not spontaneous कि बस जी कैंडिडेट ने पहले याद किया हुआ कि ये पूछेंगे तो मैं ये बोल दूंगी.
Yes, ma'am.
Hang on, yeah. So we can go a little slow. Yeah,
Yes.
you can. Yeah, everything is nice when it comes to law. When it comes to your conceptual knowledge about law, there is no problem. Whether it's constitution, IPC, even your wildlife protection, evidence, everything is fine. But I have a problem with little bit with your behavior. When I say behavior, not the way you're behaving with us, no. Behavior, the way you are going to behave with the panelists tomorrow.
Right.
आप रुकते ही नहीं हो. You go on a pause ही नहीं लेते हो. And the question, I'm still asking the question, आपका answer पहले आ जाता है. Like sir said, take a pause. You know the answer, we know you know. Take a pause for a second and then you deliver your answer.
Ma'am, I will implement that in the next interview.
Yeah, okay. एक वो चीज थी, आपकी बहुत lively personality है, which is very nice, which is very good, but you have a tendency of giving slightly longer answers when you are asked questions about general things. Okay, so you should stick to what has been asked. Okay, and if you are saying that you know everything about Himachal and you are so much into going to Himachal, then you should be well versed with the GK of Himachal also. Okay, that is one thing you need to work on. This is what I personally felt, that you were not really that much well versed. Palampur is famous for tea gardens. right? So just go through the GK of Himachal funds. Okay, like, है ना? Okay, just do that. And there were other questions also on Himachal GK which I wanted to ask you, but then I knew that you don't know the answer, and then I didn't want your confidence to go a little down. So maybe next time I'm going to do that with you.
Yes.
But please, this is like a request. I've never taught you, so this is my first interaction with you. But bacha, take a pause. Do not say more than what you are supposed to tell them. आप
Right.
सब बता रहे हो और वो आपको आप ही के आंसर से दे गोइंग टू आस्क यू क्वेश्चंस. यू हैव टू डायरेक्ट द इंटरव्यू, करेक्ट? सो जितना आप कम बोलोगे उतना सही है. रेलेवेंट बात करनी है, इतनी इंफॉर्मेशन हमने नहीं देनी है. सो यू कैन आस्क अरुण सर इफ सर एग्रीज विद मी ऑन दिस पॉइंट. This is what I personally feel, that you gave a lot of information.
Aditya ma'am is rightly saying like पारस थोड़ा सा इस पे ध्यान रखना है. ठीक है,
Yes,
जैसे
sir.
मैंने पहले भी कहा कि जरूरत से ज्यादा मत बोलो बच्चे. ठीक है, जरूरत से ज्यादा बोलेंगे तो वो फंसा लेंगे कहीं पे, और कॉन्फिडेंस पैनलिस्ट के सामने डाउन होते टाइम नहीं लगेगा. ठीक है, अभी तो ये मॉक सेशन है ना, सो यू माइट बी फीलिंग कंफर्टेबल. वहां पे जाके जब ऑनरेबल जस्टिस बैठेंगे, चेयरमैन साहब बैठेंगे, तो उनके सामने थोड़ा सा अंदर से व्यक्ति थोड़ा सा घबराया हुआ होता है. ठीक है, और
Yes.
अगर उन्होंने थोड़ा सा टेढ़े मेढ़े सवाल पूछे, सो यू माइट बी लूजिंग योर कॉन्फिडेंस. तो उसमें जाना नहीं है, बिकॉज इन द पर्सनैलिटी टेस्ट स्पेसिफिकली इन हिमाचल, बट वी हैव सीन कि यहाँ पे लॉ से रिलेटेड बहुत ज्यादा टेक्निकल सवाल जनरली नहीं पूछते. ठीक है, दे माइट बी आस्किंग यू सिंपल क्वेश्चंस ऑन लॉ, but they will be testing your personality. Okay, that do you have that personality of being an officer or not? Okay, so being a humble person is one thing, being a judicial officer is altogether different. ठीक है, तो जुडिशियल ऑफिसर आप सोच लो कि मान लो कि अगर आप किसी भी जुडिशियल ऑफिसर से बात करें तो उसका बात करने का लहजा क्या होगा. ठीक है,
Yes.
जस्ट सी दैट. ठीक है, क्योंकि आप जो हो वो आप वही दिखाओगे बेसिकली. तो आप अपना बिहेवियर कभी भी चेंज नहीं कर सकते,
नहीं कर
लेकिन
सकते.
फेक नहीं कर सकते हम चीजों को, लेकिन थोड़ा सा रोक जरूर सकते हैं. ठीक है, वी कैन रिस्ट्रिक्ट आवर कि ओके बार बार सर नहीं बोलना है, क्योंकि वो बार बार सर बोलेंगे तो वो सोचते हैं कि ये तो बहुत ही ज्यादा झुका हुआ है इंसान. ठीक है, बार बार सर बोली. गेटिंग माय पॉइंट. दूसरा, हिमाचल के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से थोड़ा सा अभी काम करो. ठीक है, मैं कुछ एक लिस्ट ऑफ क्वेश्चंस ना बना के आपको व्हाट्सएप करता हूँ बाद में. ठीक है, आज
Yes.
या कल तक. ठीक है, तो उस पे थोड़ा सा काम करना और आंसर थोड़ा सा रिस्ट्रिक्टेड देना है. ठीक है, कि अगर ट्रेडिशंस की बात है तो यू कैन से ओके इन हिमाचल देयर आर डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ ट्रेडिशंस विद रिस्पेक्ट टू डाइटीज, क्योंकि यहाँ पे देवता का ट्रेडिशन है. ठीक है, शॉल्स का, हैंडीक्राफ्ट का, ये आप बेसिक चीज बता दो. ठीक है, डोंट गो इनटू क्यूजीन्स एक्सेट्रा, क्योंकि मैंने जब आपका मेंटरशिप सेशन लिया था तो आई सेड कि ओके ये चीजें पूछी जा सकती हैं, बट
Yes.
मैंने ये नहीं कहा कि सब कुछ खुद ही बता दो जाके.
सब बता दो.
हाँ, तो इसका ध्यान रखना है. ठीक है, अगर वो आपसे क्यूजीन्स पे सवाल पूछते हैं देन आंसर. ठीक है, अपने आप मत बताओ, नहीं तो वो आपको ऐसा पूछेंगे कि अच्छा चंबा की धाम में वो चीज कैसे बनती है बताओ, तो आप फिर फंस सकते हो. ठीक है, तो उस पर थोड़ा सा
Yes.
रुकना है. बाकी स्पेसिफिकली लॉ के क्वेश्चंस पे भी सेम वही पॉइंट है कि थोड़ा सा पॉज लेके आंसर दो और लेंदी आंसर नहीं देना. ठीक है, मेंस में आप लोगों को क्या बताया मैंने कि रिस्ट्रिक्टेड आंसर्स होने चाहिए. ठीक है, और आप पहले से भी लिखते आ रहे हो ना कि 10 नंबर का सवाल है तो एक सवा पेज 1.5 पेज में खत्म कर रहे हो, तो उसी तरह से इंटरव्यू में समझ लो कि एक एक नंबर का सवाल है, तो एक नंबर का सवाल 2 लाइनों से ज्यादा आंसर नहीं देना. दैट
नहीं
इज
देना है.
बेसिक फंडामेंटल.
करेक्ट,
फंडामेंटल.
करेक्ट. Yes,
ठीक है,
I agree
तो
with sir. Yes,
बाकी
but you
पारस.
are a potential candidate. That there's no
हाँ,
doubt about it.
एग्जैक्टली. ठीक है, बस एक एक चीज का ध्यान रखना, बिकॉज इन द इंटरव्यू कैंडिडेट्स फ्रॉम हिमाचल विल आल्सो बी देयर. यू आर फ्रॉम आउटसाइड हिमाचल. थोड़ा सा वो नेगेटिव में ना जाए, इस करके हिमाचल के बारे में थोड़ा बहुत रिसर्च करके रख लो. ठीक है,
Yes.
अभी वी हैव टाइम है ना, अभी 7-8 डेज हैं अभी भी, तो उसके ऊपर थोड़ा सा काम करो जो भी आप, क्योंकि लॉ पे यू डोंट हैव टू वर्क दैट मच नाउ, वो काम आप कर चुके हो. ठीक है, अब जो है हिमाचल का जीके आसपास की जानकारी क्या है. ठीक है, मैंने आपको पहले भी बताया था न्यूज़पेपर को लेके कहाँ से क्या करना है. ठीक है, उसके ऊपर काम करो. ठीक है, और बाकी लॉ पॉइंट्स पे तो आई डोंट थिंक कुछ एक्स्ट्रा आपको करने की जरूरत है. दैट इज गुड इनफ. वो तो मेंस हम देखते ही आ रहे हैं, आपके पेपर्स मैंने देखे हैं सारे, उसमें भी बहुत ज्यादा भी काम नहीं करना. अपडेटेड हो आप, उसमें भी कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. बस इंटरव्यू से 1-2 दिन पहले तक का जो न्यूज़पेपर्स में जो चीजें आ रही होंगी उनका थोड़ा सा खास ध्यान रखना है. ठीक है, तो अभी
Yes.
स्पेसिफिक फोकस सिर्फ 2 चीजों पे, एज मैम सेड, कि एक तो आंसर्स को शॉर्ट करो. ठीक है, जो भी आप आंसर दें, ट्राई टू गिव द शॉर्ट आंसर। नंबर 2, हिमाचल के बारे में बहुत ज्यादा सब कुछ मत बता दो, कोशिश करो कि वो आपसे सवाल पूछे और फिर आप उनको उतना ही आंसर दो, ठीक है।
Right.
बस ये 2 चीजों पे काम करो और उसके लिए पहले पढ़ लो थोड़ा सा, ठीक है। अगर डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स की बात है तो कौन कौन से डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स हैं, क्या क्या है, उसके बारे में थोड़ा अभी रिसर्च करना पड़ेगा आपको, ठीक
Yes,
है।
sir.
एनीथिंग यू वांट टू आस्क अस?
Sir, nothing specific. So ma'am, I don't want to make a bun and I want to keep like a half tie. So I wanted to ask that if that will also look formal. Uh,
No.
so I should make a bun.
Yes. This is what I feel, that you should have neat hair.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. I'll do
Yeah.
that, ma'am.
ठीक है,
Yes.
जब आपका
All the
एक्सटर्नल
best.
सेशन होगा ना, व्हेन यू विल बी हैविंग द एक्सटर्नल पैनल इंटरव्यू, तो उसमें आप पूरा फॉर्मल एक बार अपीयरेंस में आ सकते हैं, ठीक है। और
Yes,
ये भी
sir.
रोज तो साड़ी नहीं डाल सकते, ठीक है, रोज तो नहीं डाल सकते, तो एक दिन एक्सटर्नल पैनल के सामने जिस दिन हम लोग लेंगे, तो उस दिन यू कैन बी इन द फॉर्मल ड्रेस, ठीक है। चलिए,
Right.
All right.
ओके
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
ma'am. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, Paras. Best of luck. Thank you,
Thank
Fidas,
you.
ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. All the best, Paris.
Thank you, ma'am.